The champagne had gone flat hours ago. Nora Harrison checked her watch, again 10:43 p.m., and blew out the last flickering candle on the dining room table. The anniversary dinner she'd spent all day preparing sat untouched, congealing under the dim pendant light. 7 years of marriage, celebrated alone. She reached for her phone, reading James's text for the 20th time. Stuck in client meeting. Don't wait up. Sorry. No terms of endearment. No promise to make it up to her. Just 12 cold words. That felt like strangers compared to the passionate vows they'd exchanged on their wedding day. Nora smoothed out her emerald cocktail dress. The one James had once said made her honey-brown eyes sparkle, and began mechanically clearing the table. Her movements were precise, controlled, betraying nothing of the unease coiling in her stomach. This was the 3rd time this month he'd missed dinner. The 12th time he'd been stuck with clients past 9 p.m. The kitchen gleamed under the recess lighting as she wrapped leftover beef Wellington and slid it into the refrigerator. Their home in the suburbs of Boston was immaculate hardwood floors that caught the morning light, custom cabinetry she'd selected during their renovation last year, and photographs of their smiling faces decorating the hallway. A perfect life, meticulously curated. At least on the surface. Nora poured herself another glass of the expensive Cabernet she'd selected for their celebration and carried it upstairs to their bedroom. The master suite, with its vaulted ceiling and French doors opening to a small balcony, felt cavernous without James's presence. She kicked off her heels and sat cross-legged on their king-sized bed, the same bed where they'd made love countless times, where they'd talked about having children someday. Her fingers traced the edge of her glass as she contemplated calling him. Something had shifted between them in recent months, a widening distance she couldn't quite name. James's investment firm was doing well, bringing in new clients and expanding its reach. He worked longer hours, came home exhausted, and their conversations had grown increasingly superficial. It's just a busy season, he'd assured her last month. Once we land the Westover account, things will calm down. But things hadn't calmed down. If anything, James had become more distracted, more absent. Nora sipped her wine and tried to quell the anxiety rising in her chest. She was being paranoid. James loved her. They had built this life together, brick by careful brick. With a deep breath, she reached for her tablet and logged into their shared financial portal. As an accountant, Nora had always managed their household finances. James joked that she could spot a discrepancy from a mile away, my personal financial detective. He'd call her with a fond smile. She scrolled through recent transactions, a routine she performed weekly. Restaurants she recognized, the Dry, Cleaner on Maple Street, the monthly donation to their alma mater. Then she saw it. A charge from the Belmont Hotel downtown, $479 for last Tuesday night, when James had texted about staying at a colleague's place after their corporate event. Ran late. Nora's fingers froze above the screen. The Belmont was one of the most exclusive hotels in Boston, known for its discretion and luxury. Not the kind of place where corporate events were typically held. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she scrolled back further, searching for patterns. There it was again, the Belmont, 3 weeks ago. And before that, charges from upscale restaurants she'd never been to, at times when James had claimed to be working late. A jewelry store transaction for $1,250. 2 months ago jewelry she'd never received. The wine glass trembled in her hand. She set it down carefully on the knitstand, afraid she might shatter it with the force of her grip. With methodical precision, she began taking screenshots of the transactions, saving them to a private folder. Then she moved to their email account, scanning through messages. Nothing unusual there. James was too careful for that. But their cell phone bill that might tell a different story. She navigated to their provider's website and examined the call logs. One number appeared repeatedly, late at night, with calls, lasting 30, 40 minutes at a time. A number she didn't recognize. Nora wrote it down, her handwriting steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Tomorrow, she would do more digging. Tonight, she needed to maintain her composure. For when James eventually came home, as if summoned by her thoughts, she heard the garage door opening downstairs. Quickly, she closed all the browser tabs, wiped her history, and slipped into the bathroom. She removed her makeup, changed into silk pajamas, and was sitting at her vanity, brushing her hair, when she heard his footsteps on the stairs. "You're still up," James said, leaning against the doorframe. His tie was loosened, his eyes tired but bright. There was something different about him tonight, an energy that seemed at odds with someone who'd spent hours in tedious client meetings. "I was just heading to bed," Nora replied, her voice carefully neutral. "How was your meeting?" "Brutal. The Westover people are demanding, but I think we've got them." He crossed the room and kissed the top of her head, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "I'm sorry about our anniversary. I'll make it up to you this weekend." The familiar scent of his cologne mingled with something else, something floral and distinctly feminine. Nora continued brushing her hair, stroke after methodical stroke. "Of course, I understand. You're the best, you know that?" James smiled, that charming smile that had won her heart in college. "I'm going to grab a quick shower." Nora nodded and watched in the mirror as he disappeared into the bathroom. The moment the door closed, she set down her brush and reached for her phone. She texted her college friend Diane, who worked as a private investigator. "Need to talk? Coffee tomorrow?" Then she slipped between the cool sheets of their bed and turned toward the window, away from James's side. In the dark, she began calculating not just the financial transactions that didn't add up, but the cost of the life she thought they'd built together. By the time James emerged from the bathroom and slid into bed beside her, Nora had already decided, if her suspicions were correct, she wouldn't just walk away from this marriage. She would ensure James paid for every lie, every betrayal, every moment of their life together that he had devalued. As his breathing deepened into sleep beside her, Nora remained wide awake, her mind working like the accountant she was tallying debts, calculating interest, and planning for collection day. Morning light filtered through the blinds as Nora sipped her coffee at the kitchen island, scrolling through emails on her tablet. James bustled around, preparing for work, his movements rushed yet practiced. She watched him with new awareness, cataloging every gesture, every word. "I've got that Henderson presentation today," he said, adjusting his navy tie, the one she'd given him for Christmas. "Might be another late one." "Of course," Nora replied, her voice pleasant. "Good luck. I'm sure you'll impress them." James paused, briefly studying her face. "You're not upset about last night?" She offered him a small smile. "It's work. I understand." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she maintained her composure. "We can celebrate this weekend." Relief visibly washed over him. He leaned down to kiss her cheek, his hand briefly squeezing her shoulder. "You're amazing. That's why I married you." The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, Nora's pleasant expression dissolved. She reached for her phone and dialed the number she'd discovered last night. After 3 rings, a woman's voice answered. "Hello?" Nora ended the call immediately, her suspicions crystallizing into certainty. She'd heard that voice before at James's company holiday party last December. Vanessa Phillips, his ambitious new marketing director with her perfectly highlighted hair and designer suits. An hour later, Nora sat across from Diane at a cafe 15 miles from her neighborhood, far enough that she wouldn't encounter anyone. She knew financial infidelity almost always accompanies the physical kind, Diane said, reviewing the screenshots Nora had compiled. Her dark eyes narrowed as she scrolled through the evidence. And from what I'm seeing, James has been quite busy. I need to know everything, Nora said, her voice steady. Not just the affair, but where the money's going. Our investment portfolio has been underperforming lately, according to him. Diane looked up sharply. You think he's siphoning funds? I don't know what to think anymore. Nora's fingers tightened around her mug. But James handles significant client investments. If he's being careless with our money, it could be worse with others, Diane finished. I'll look into it, but discreetly. The last thing you want is for him to realize you're investigating. That afternoon, Nora returned to work at the accounting firm where she'd been employed for the past 5 years. She moved through her day with mechanical efficiency, reviewing client files and attending meetings while her mind constantly returned to the growing evidence of James's betrayal. During her lunch break, she approached Thomas Harrington, the IT specialist who maintained their firm's security systems. Tall and lean with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, Thomas had always been friendly but professional. I have a hypothetical situation, Nora began carefully, closing his office door. If someone wanted to hide financial transactions from their spouse, what methods might they use? Thomas studied her face, understanding dawning in his eyes. This isn't about a client, is it? Nora hesitated, then shook her head. I need to understand what I might be missing. Offshore accounts are common, he said after a moment. Shell, companies, cryptocurrency wallets, even old-fashioned cash withdrawals that don't leave digital footprints. He paused. Nora, if you're in trouble. I'm not, she assured him. Just gathering information. But I'd appreciate your discretion. Of course, he considered her for a moment. I could help you look deeper, if needed. Digital forensics is something of a specialty of mine. His offer surprised her. Why would you do that? Thomas smiled faintly. Let's just say I've seen what financial deception can do to people. My mother went through something similar. For the first time in days, Nora felt a flicker of hope. Thank you. I might take you up on that. Over the next 2 weeks, Nora lived a double life. During the day, she was the efficient accountant and attentive wife, maintaining a perfect facade. At night, while James slept, she meticulously documented every suspicious transaction, every unexplained absence, and every inconsistency in his stories. Thomas proved invaluable, showing her how to access deleted browser history on their home computer and recover data from James's old devices. What they discovered alarmed her. James had been meeting with investors, whose names never appeared in the firm's official records. These could be legitimate clients who prefer privacy, Thomas cautioned during one of their lunch meetings. But combined with everything else, It's damning, Nora finished. The mounting evidence suggested James wasn't just cheating on her. He might be engaged in financial improprieties at his investment firm. One evening, James arrived home with an unexpected gift, a diamond bracelet that sparkled under the kitchen lights. To make up for our anniversary, he explained, clasping it around her wrist. His touch was gentle, familiar, and for a moment, Nora almost wavered. This was the man she'd built her life with, the man she'd once believed in completely. It's beautiful, she said, examining the delicate stones. A quick mental calculation estimated its value at several $1,000s, money that supposedly wasn't available for the home renovation they'd been discussing. You deserve to be spoiled. James pulled her close, his cologne enveloping her. I've been neglecting you lately. Later that night, while James showered, Nora photographed the bracelet and its certificate of authenticity, adding them to her growing file of evidence. She then called Diane. I need you to follow him tomorrow, she said quietly. He mentioned a lunch meeting with the Westover clients, but I checked his calendar when he left his laptop open. There's nothing scheduled. I'll be on it, Diane promised. And Nora? Whatever happens tomorrow, remember you're not the one who broke this marriage. The next day crawled by as Nora waited for news. Shortly after 2 p.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Plaza Hotel, Suite 1142, with VP photos incoming. The images appeared moments later. James and Vanessa entering the luxury hotel, his hand resting intimately on the small of her back. Another showed them at the hotel restaurant, leaning close in conversation, their fingers intertwined on the table. Nora stared at the evidence, feeling strangely calm. The final confirmation should have devastated her, but instead it solidified her resolve. She forwarded the photos to her secure email account, then deleted the messages from her phone. That evening, she prepared James's favorite meal herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables. She wore the emerald dress he loved and the diamond bracelet he'd given her. When he arrived home, surprise flickered across his face. "What's the occasion?" he asked, loosening his tie. "No occasion." Nora smiled, pouring him a glass of wine. "Just felt like doing something nice." Over dinner, she listened attentively as James described his day, noting each lie, each omission. When he claimed to have spent lunch reviewing portfolios with his team, she nodded sympathetically. "You work too hard," she said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. The diamond bracelet caught the light. "Maybe we should plan that trip to Bermuda you've been talking about." James's eyes lit up. "Really? You've been so busy lately. I thought you might not be interested." "I'm interested in everything you do," Nora replied, maintaining eye contact. "In fact, I was thinking I could stop by your office tomorrow." "We could. Have lunch." A flicker of panic crossed his face before he controlled it. "Tomorrow's not great. Back-to-back meetings." "Another time, then." She smiled and changed the subject, but the momentary fear in his eyes confirmed everything. That night, as James slept beside her, Nora made her decision. She would continue gathering evidence, building her case methodically and patiently. She would untangle their finances, document his indiscretions, both personal and professional, and when the time was right, she would dismantle the glass castle of lies he'd constructed. Piece by precious piece, she turned to study his sleeping face, so familiar yet suddenly foreign. "Enjoy your dreams while they last," she whispered, too softly to wake him. "Reality is coming." The executive conference room at Burton and Associates hummed with quiet tension as Nora concluded her presentation. As senior accountant, she'd just identified significant tax liability issues for one of their largest clients. Meticulous analysis that had earned approving nods from the partners. "Excellent work, Nora," Richard Burton himself commented as the meeting adjourned. "This is why you're on track for partnership." She accepted the praise with a modest smile, gathering her materials. 3 months had passed since she'd discovered James's affair, and in that time, she'd channeled her pain into professional excellence, impressing colleagues with her attention to detail and tireless work ethic. "Hiding in plain sight," Thomas remarked as they walked back to their offices. In recent weeks, he'd become her closest confidant, the only person besides Diane who knew the full extent of her investigation into James's activities. "You're becoming quite the actress." "Necessity breeds adaptation," she replied, closing her office door behind them. "Any updates on those offshore transfers?" Thomas placed a flash drive on her desk. "James has been busy. 3 new accounts opened in the Cayman Islands, with regular deposits totaling nearly $200,000 over the past 6 months. Nora absorbed this information with practiced calm. What had begun as an investigation into infidelity had evolved into something far more serious, evidence of potential financial fraud. James appeared to be diverting client funds into personal accounts, using his position at the investment firm to enrich himself and, presumably, finance his double life with Vanessa. He's getting careless, Thomas continued, showing her transaction records on his laptop. The pattern suggests he's planning something big. These aren't just affair expenses anymore. He's preparing to leave, Nora said, the realization crystallizing. Stockpiling resources before making his exit from the marriage, and possibly from the country. Thomas frowned. If he's embezzling client funds, this goes beyond divorce territory. We're talking criminal charges. I know. Nora's voice remained steady, despite the gravity of their discovery. That's why I've scheduled a meeting with Eleanor. Winters tomorrow. The prosecutor turned defense attorney? Thomas raised his eyebrows. That's playing hardball. This stopped being a game the moment he started stealing. Nora closed the laptop. I need to protect myself, and his clients deserve to know what's happening to their investments. That evening, Nora maintained her carefully constructed facade, as she and James attended a charity gala hosted by his firm. She wore a midnight blue gown that contrasted with her auburn hair, the diamond bracelet glittering at her wrist, a constant reminder of his hollow attempts at appeasement. James played the devoted husband perfectly, his hand resting possessively on her back as they mingled with Boston's financial elite. Watching him charm potential investors with practiced ease, Nora wondered how she'd ever missed the performative nature of his affection. You two are couple goals, commented Elise Westover. Wife of the client James had supposedly been meeting the night of their anniversary. 7 years and still looking at each other like newlyweds. 8 years together, actually counting dating, James corrected with a proud smile, pulling Nora closer. Best decision I ever made. How did you meet? Elise asked, sipping champagne. Before. James could answer. Nora interjected. University library. I caught him using my research notes without permission. She smiled sweetly. He's always been comfortable taking what isn't his. James's grip on her waist tightened imperceptibly, but his smile never faltered. I prefer to think of it as recognizing value when I see it. Later, as they drove home in silence, Nora could feel his sideways glances. That was an interesting way to describe our meeting, he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. Was it? I thought it was accurate. She gazed out the window at passing streetlights. Speaking of accuracy, I was reviewing our investment portfolio yesterday. The returns seem unusually low compared to market performance. James's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Markets fluctuate. You know that. I do. She turned to study his profile. I also know when numbers don't add up. For a moment, alarm flashed across his face before he recovered. You're tired. We can discuss finances tomorrow if you're concerned. No rush, Nora replied calmly. I'm a patient woman. I can wait for things to become clear. The following afternoon, Nora sat across from Eleanor Winters in the attorney's sleek downtown office. Eleanor's reputation preceded her a former prosecutor, who now specialized in high-stakes divorce and white-collar crime cases, known for her strategic brilliance and discretion. Your documentation is impressive, Eleanor commented, reviewing the files Nora had compiled over months of careful investigation. Most people in your situation bring emotions. You've brought evidence. I prefer to deal in facts, Nora replied. What are my options? Eleanor leaned back, studying her. That depends on your objective. Do you want to punish him, protect yourself, or both? I want justice, Nora said simply. For myself, and for the people he's stealing from. Then we need to move carefully. Eleanor outlined a strategy that made Nora's accounting mind appreciate its precision. First, we secure your financial independence. Transfer your legitimate assets to accounts he cannot access. Document everything, but touch nothing that might be considered ill-gotten gains. Already done, Nora confirmed. With Thomas's help, she'd established separate accounts and moved her premarital assets and legitimate earnings to safety. Second, We prepare for both divorce proceedings and potential criminal investigations. The evidence suggests financial crimes that regulatory authorities would be very interested in. Won't I be implicated? Nora asked. We have joint accounts. Your consistent pattern of being uninvolved in his professional dealings works in your favor, Eleanor assured her. Your documentation shows you question discrepancies when you notice them. That demonstrates due diligence. As the meeting concluded, Eleanor fixed Nora with a penetrating gaze. The most dangerous period will be immediately after he realizes. You know, men like James don't surrender control easily. Are you prepared for that confrontation? More than he is, Nora replied with quiet certainty. That night, as spring rain lashed against the windows of their suburban home, Nora sat in their home office, reviewing the final pieces of her documentation. The printer hummed softly as it produced copies of incriminating bank statements and transfer records. James's unexpected arrival interrupted her work. He stood in the doorway, watching her with an unreadable expression. Working late? Just finishing some client research, she replied, casually closing the file folders. How was your meeting? Canceled. He entered the room, loosening his tie. The client had a family emergency. His gaze drifted to the papers on her desk. Anything interesting? Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow. She stood, gathering the documents into her briefcase, the one Thomas had equipped with a biometric lock. Are you hungry? I can make something. James stepped closer, reaching to brush a strand of hair from her face. The gesture, once cherished, now made her skin crawl. You've been different lately. Distant. Have I? She met his gaze steadily. I've been busy with work. Partnership track demands focus. Is that all it is? His fingers trailed down her cheek to her collarbone. Because sometimes I wonder if you suspect something. Nora's heart pounded, but her voice remained calm. Suspect what, James? For a tense moment, they stared at each other, the question hanging between them. Then James smiled, the charming smile that had once melted her defenses. That I'm planning a surprise for our upcoming vacation. You've always been too perceptive for your own good. I love surprises, she replied, matching his smile with practiced ease. As long as they're good ones? Later that night, after James had fallen asleep, Nora slipped out of bed and sent a text to Thomas. He knows something's off. Time to accelerate the timeline. Thomas's response came immediately. Documentation complete. Ready when you are. Nora gazed at her sleeping husband, a man who had promised to love and cherish her, who had instead betrayed every vow they'd made. Tomorrow, she would contact the regulatory authorities with evidence of his financial misconduct. The day after, she would file for divorce. As she slid back into bed, maintaining careful distance from James, Nora reflected on the silent partnership. They'd established one where she gathered evidence while he accumulated lies. Soon, very soon, the silent partner would speak, and when she did, the carefully constructed world James Harrison had built would crumble beneath the weight of his own deception. The Boston skyline glowed against the twilight sky as Nora watched from the window of Eleanor's office. 48 hours had passed since she'd submitted evidence of James's financial improprieties to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, she waited for the next phase of her carefully orchestrated plan. The SEC has frozen the suspicious accounts, Eleanor confirmed, setting down her phone. They're moving faster than usual, given the scope of the allegations and the evidence you provided. And my protection is confirmed? Nora asked, turning from the view. You're established as a whistleblower with immunity from prosecution, Eleanor assured her. Your documented attempts to understand the discrepancies, combined with your coming forward voluntarily, satisfy the regulatory requirements. Nora nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders. For months, she'd balanced on a knife's edge, gathering evidence while maintaining her cover. Now the pretense could finally end. What about tonight? Eleanor asked, her expression concerned. Are you certain you want to confront him alone? We could arrange for— No, Nora interrupted firmly. This needs to happen at home, on my terms. Thomas will be nearby if needed, but this confrontation is mine. As she drove home, Nora rehearsed what she would say, how she would remain calm when James inevitably tried to manipulate the situation. The diamond bracelet he'd given her sat in her purse, her final prop in this performance. Their house was dark when she arrived, unusual for 7 p.m. Entering cautiously, Nora called out, "James?" No response. She moved through the silent rooms. Senses heightened. In their bedroom, she found the first sign something was wrong. Drawers partially open, hangers empty in his closet. Her heart raced as she checked his office, finding files missing and his laptop gone. He was running. Nora immediately called Thomas. He's packing. Track his phone. Already on it, Thomas replied, the sound of typing in the background. Got him. He's at the Plaza Hotel. Hasn't left the country yet. Probably saying goodbye to Vanessa before his grand escape, Nora said bitterly. How long will it take you to get there? 15 minutes. What's your plan? Nora was already heading for her car. I'm going to give him exactly what he deserves. The Plaza Hotel's elegant lobby bustled with evening activity as Nora strode purposefully toward the elevators, her heels clicking against marble floors. She knew which suite to find him in, the same one Diane had photographed months ago, his. Creature of habit tendencies working against him yet again. Outside suite 1142, she paused, straightening her posture before knocking firmly. The door opened to reveal James, his expression shifting from expectation to shock. Nora? What are you? She pushed past him into the suite, noting the half-packed suitcase on the bed. Planning a trip without me? How thoughtful of you to pack first. James closed the door, composing himself. I can explain. This isn't what it looks like, isn't it? Nora gestured to the champagne chilling in an ice bucket, 2 glasses waiting nearby. Let me guess Vanessa's joining you shortly? Perhaps. For one last celebration before you disappear with the money you've stolen? Color drained from his face. What are you talking about? Drop the act, James. Nora's voice was steel. I know everything, the affair, the embezzlement, the offshore accounts. I've known for months. He stared at her, calculation replacing shock. You're bluffing. You can't possibly. Cayman Islands account number 85,729,364. She recited from memory. Bermuda Trust under Phoenix Holdings, and the Swiss arrangement under your mother's maiden name. Should I continue with the exact amounts you've transferred, or have I made my point? James sank into a chair, his confident facade crumbling. How did you— I'm an accountant, James. Numbers tell stories. Yours told a particularly sordid one. She placed her purse on the table and removed a folder. The SEC has already frozen your accounts. They're particularly interested in the Westover funds you diverted. You went to the authorities? Disbelief and rage warred in his expression. You're my wife. A distinction you seem to forget every time you were in this hotel with Vanessa. Nora remained standing, maintaining the higher ground. But more. Importantly, I'm a certified financial professional with ethical obligations. Your clients trusted you with their life savings. James leaped to his feet, desperation replacing shock. Nora, listen to me. We can fix this together. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. The words that might once have weakened her now strengthened her resolve. Love? Is that what you call lying to my face for over a year? Planning to abandon me while stealing from innocent people? It got complicated, he pleaded, reaching for her hands. Vanessa was a mistake. The financial situation I was going to pay it all back. I just needed time to make some investments work. Nora stepped back from his touch. That's not how client funds work, and you know it. That's not how marriage works either. Seeing his manipulation failing, James's demeanor shifted. His eyes hardened as he glanced toward the door. You've made a serious mistake. If I go down for this, you'll go down with me. Joint accounts, joint tax returns, you're implicated in. Everything I've done. Actually, I'm not. Nora removed another document from her folder. This whistleblower protection agreement grants me immunity in exchange for my cooperation. The authorities know I came forward voluntarily as soon as I discovered the extent of your crimes. James lunged for the document, but Nora anticipated the move, stepping aside as the hotel door opened. Thomas entered with two SEC agents who had been waiting downstairs. James Harrison? One agent asked formally. We have some questions regarding certain financial transactions associated with your firm. As the agents explained the investigation and James's legal situation, Nora watched the man she had loved transform before her eyes, from confident financial advisor to cornered criminal. When they finally escorted him out, he turned to her one last time. You planned this, he accused, eyes burning with fury. You set me up. No, James, Nora replied calmly. You did that all by yourself. I simply made sure you couldn't escape. The consequences. After the agents departed with James, Thomas approached Nora cautiously. Are you okay? She exhaled slowly, the tension of months finally releasing. I will be. There's still the divorce to handle, but Eleanor says it should be straightforward given the circumstances. What about the house? Thomas asked as they left the hotel. I'm selling it, Nora decided. Too many memories, and I need a fresh start. Later. That night, in the quiet of her soon-to-be-former home, Nora removed her wedding ring and placed it beside the diamond bracelet. These symbols of false promises would be sold, the proceeds donated to a foundation supporting victims of financial fraud. She opened her laptop and typed a final entry in the journal she'd been keeping throughout her investigation. Today marks the end of a chapter written in deception. James chose his path, and now he walks it alone. As for me, I choose truth, however painful. I choose justice, however difficult. Most importantly, I choose myself. Outside, the spring rain had given way to clear skies, stars visible for the key. First time in days. Nora stepped onto the porch, breathing deeply. The air smelled fresh, cleansed, a fitting metaphor for the new beginning that awaited her. Autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of Nora's downtown office, illuminating the plaque on her desk. Harrison Financial Security Consultants, protecting your future. 6 months had passed since James's arrest, and Nora had transformed. Her pain into purpose, founding a firm dedicated to helping individuals, particularly women, secure their financial independence. Your 3 o'clock is here, announced Rachel, her assistant. Mrs. Westover. Nora looked up in surprise. Elise. Westover? I wasn't expecting her. Elise entered moments later, elegant as ever though noticeably more subdued than when Nora had last seen her at the charity gala nearly a year ago. The financial scandal had impacted the Westovers significantly, though thanks to Nora's early intervention, they'd recovered much of their investment. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment, Elise began, settling into the chair across from Nora's desk. I wanted to personally deliver this. She placed an envelope on the desk. Inside, Nora found an invitation to a fundraising event for a new foundation supporting financial literacy education. We'd like you to be the keynote speaker, Elise explained. Your courage in exposing James's scheme saved many families from complete financial ruin. My husband included. Nora studied the invitation, emotion tightening her throat. I was just doing what was right. Which is rarer than you might think, Elise replied with a sad smile. The prosecutors mentioned your testimony was crucial in. securing his conviction. The trial had concluded 2 months prior, with James sentenced to 12 years for securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. Vanessa had negotiated a lesser sentence in exchange for her testimony, revealing that James had planned to leave the country with her and the embezzled funds the very night Nora confronted him. "How are you doing?" Elise asked gently. "Personally. I mean, these situations leave scars beyond the financial." Nora considered the question thoughtfully. "Better than I expected. The divorce was finalized last month. Selling the house was difficult, but my new place feels more authentically mine." She gestured to the office around them. "And this venture gives meaning to what happened." After Elise departed, Nora completed her afternoon appointments, advising a recent widow on estate management, helping a young professional establish secure retirement planning, and consulting with a woman considering divorce about financial protection strategies. As evening approached, she gathered her belongings, reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed. The woman who had once built her identity around being James Harrison's wife now stood confidently independent, her professional reputation enhanced rather than destroyed by the scandal. Outside, Thomas waited by his car, a routine they'd established. In recent months, what had begun as professional cooperation during her investigation had evolved into friendship and gradually something deeper. "Productive day?" he asked, opening the passenger door for her. "Very," she replied, sliding into the seat. "The Westover Foundation wants me to speak at their inaugural event." "Not surprising," Thomas commented as he drove toward the restaurant where they had dinner reservations. "You've become something of a folk hero in financial circles. The accountant who brought down a fraudster and then built an empire from the ashes." Nora laughed. "Hardly an empire. 3 employees and a growing client list isn't exactly Wall Street." "Yet," Thomas countered with a smile, "give it time. You're already getting referrals from Eleanor's highest-profile clients." "At the restaurant, huh?" Small Italian place they discovered together. Nora sipped her wine and studied Thomas across the table. His intelligence and integrity had been her lifeline during the darkest period of her life, his support unwavering even when she doubted herself. "I received the final restitution payment today," she told him. "The court-ordered portion of James's assets that weren't directly tied to illegal activities." Thomas raised his eyebrows. "That's significant. What will you do with it?" "I'm establishing a scholarship fund for accounting students specializing in fraud detection," Nora explained. "Seems fitting to transform his money into something that might prevent others from doing what he did." "Poetic justice," Thomas approved. "Speaking of justice, did you hear from the prison counselor?" Nora nodded. James had been attempting to contact her, sending letters that she'd instructed to be returned unopened. He's still trying. The counselor says he claims to have changed, to understand the magnitude of his mistakes. "And do you believe that?" Thomas asked carefully. "I believe people can change," Nora replied after consideration. "But I also believe some bridges can't be rebuilt once burned. Whatever journey of redemption James is on, it doesn't include me." Later, as they walked along the harbor, Boston's lights reflecting in the dark water, Thomas took her hand. The gesture still felt new, exciting yet comfortable, like the beginning of something built on solid ground rather than shifting sand. "Any regrets?" he asked as they paused to watch a boat glide past. "About how everything unfolded?" Nora considered the question seriously. "I regret not trusting my instincts sooner. I regret the years spent building a life with someone who didn't value it." She turned to face him. "But I don't regret the clarity it brought, or the strength I found. And I certainly don't regret where it led me." Thomas smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "To a harbor walk on a Thursday night?" "To myself," Nora corrected, returning his smile. "And yes, coincidentally, to this particular harbor, walk with this particular person. As they continued their stroll, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The betrayal that could have destroyed her had instead revealed her resilience. The deception meant to diminish her had ultimately empowered her. And the ending of one chapter had allowed for the beginning of another, one written entirely in her own hand. In her jacket pocket, her fingers brushed against the small notebook she still carried, a habit from her investigation days. Its pages were no longer filled with evidence of James's crimes, but with plans for her future business strategies, personal goals, dreams deferred but not forgotten. Renaissance, she had titled this new journal on its first page, remembering the art. History classes she'd loved in college. Like the masters of that transformative period, she had emerged from darkness into light, creating something beautiful from the remnants of what was lost. The night air carried the promise of change as autumn deepened toward winter. Nora Harrison, no longer defined by betrayal, but by the strength it had awakened in her, walked forward into that promise, her steps sure, her path chosen, her future reclaimed.